We are back in the next chapter of the endless saga of digital media literacy, week 4, video lecture, our asynchronous dialogue, and we're checking out some questions from John. John's playing devil's advocate today. John borrows a question from Denise and asks, quote, why does Pulp Fiction have such great emotional appeal, end quote. To which John agrees is a fair question. Well, I think Denise also provides a fantastic response in his description of the pulps on page 104. And to read directly here, quote, the pulps were successors of the dime novels of the 19th century. They were popular because they revolved around the themes of great interest to people, such as crime, adventure, and sex. And they were written in a sensationalist and lurid way, end quote. Sound like anything we're interested in today. The pulps. That does it remind us of of texts we go gonzo for, right? Breaking Bad comes to mind. Maybe even I don't know. Game of Thrones seems to get a lot of discussion on our message boards and video responses. These kinds of texts, right, that appeal to the sort of the sensational, the lurid, and we can actually cross that over to news media. Maybe what a lot of news media does now, because there's so much competition for eyeballs, for clicks, for users online, for viewership, for readers, they have to rely on the sensational. And so when you're always chasing the sensational, then where are you making maybe compromises? And what does that then do to credibility? It's an important question. It's an important question, right? But yeah, we are into lurid material. We're drawn to it, like moths to the flame. Reminds me of that question Elizabeth was asking about. Question about losing train of thought here. The question about serial killers, right? Popularity, proliferation of serial killer artifacts, and you're right, it's total overload. It has become its own subgenre of mystery, suspense, thriller, horror, what have you, like the serial killer fascination. And we sure obsess about that in America, and even quote unquote safe people or whatever, we can't kind of turn away from the macabre and the macabre imagery as we come toward a close of spooky season in the fall here. So John also asks, why did ad creators begin paying more attention to the design and layout of the ad itself? And as news media emerged, and think about in the 20th century, there's all of these competing mediums now. It's no longer the newspaper is the dominant medium. It's being challenged first by radio and then by television, and then you've got cinema emerging, and they had newsreels prior to many of their features. And so images, right? We want to recognize imagery. Visual culture is more persuasive than words, than linguistic expressions. This is why they would have Nobel Prizes for these kinds of provocative images that might appear on the cover of Time magazine or National Geographic and what have you, because the image would implant in the audience, and suddenly viewers were seeing the world in a whole new way, and it was opening that up. And so that is an important paradox to consider. It really is. That's why it's but one reason why America, the U.S., was very united in World War II. There was less of the raw kinds of scary footage being displayed and shown. There were a lot of government-produced propaganda films that sort of created a strong sense of nationalism that helped us come together, whereas, right, on the other hand, a lot of the documentary footage coming out of later wars, next generation over, Vietnam, were very cynical, very negative, very gratuitous. And people were shocked, and they responded in different kinds of ways to that shock. It created outright, uproar, and then some people just turned away. Right? It's like, this is too shocking for me. I can't process it. I can't process it individually, let alone socially and culturally. So I'm going to maybe ignore it. And visual culture has that kind of potency to it. That's why it's worthy area of study. During my adolescent years, I loved to look at comic books. Why is this form of media so appealing to young boys? Well, definitely in the history of comics, the medium appealed more often to that young male demographic, but it was also developed by young males. You had male artists, male writers, male editors, and so there was a bit of a stranglehold. Gender stranglehold on the production and distribution of comics and comic books. They're also seen as, something that, I don't know, moms were picking up at the grocery stores, or kids, buying on the stands. But then they also shipped, this was one of the big movements in comic history, they shipped millions overseas to the soldiers. And soldiers received comic books as a kind of token of home, right? It was like cigarettes, comic books, and what have you. And this created a serious imprint, a real lasting cultural nostalgia for the American soldier. And after they returned home, my goodness, you saw a boom in comic sales throughout those golden years of comics history, and as well as some eventual shifts in that. But it's been a very male-dominated medium, although we can definitely say both genders enjoying it, and they're trying to create more and more market space each year for the female consumer, the female audience, and what have you. That we have to frame it in that way is unfortunate, but if it's accurate to recognize how that cultural history takes place. Why is it so important to keep the mechanics consistent when writing? This is actually a really smart question, John. It's important to keep the mechanics consistent when writing because the writer can lose credibility, right? You get sloppy with your writing, you lose credibility. And thus, if you lose credibility, the most likely scenario is you lose the reader, right? I stop reading you. I don't want to take you serious. I can't believe any of your claims. So there's a real it's like, I was going to say Boy Who Cried Wolf theme here, but something about this idea of if you can't express yourself well, then why should I give you my full attention? And especially in a day and age where we are bombarded with images, sounds, noises, ads, information overload, then we have to be more strong, more capable, strong, savvy at our communication, whether it's written, oral, and so on. Thus, once again, that need for a digital media literacy. I'm going to read a couple of questions from Ezel and see if we are going to be able to bring this to a close in the next couple of minutes here. How can a person create their own writing style? Can one create a writing style by copying other styles? Almost exclusively. Ezel, thank you. We cannot not copy others. We do this from birth. This is how we learn to walk. This is how we learn to talk. We copy others. And let's extend this into our writing. This is one reason why my strategy and now our collective strategy with the Media and Ethics major at ManQ is we want to fuel you. We want to feed you great writing, good, solid writing, full of rich ideas. Find stuff that you can be passionate reading about. And once you locate that area of passion, the areas you do like reading about. And so I'm not going to discount, I'm going to tie this to John, I'm going to tie this to a comment Megan made on the boards a couple of weeks ago. This idea of comic books, right? And they do carry, they still can carry a type of negative stigma or a lesser. We talk about boundaries of high-low culture that traditionally viewed as low culture experience comics. No, if there is excellent storytelling in comics, there's excellent narrative form in some comics, in graphic novels and what have you. So find something you can be passionate about reading, and then immerse yourself, allow yourself to process that so that you can emulate styles that you like, okay? And so being familiar with how others write can help you adapt your own writing style, which is terrific that so many of you have commented and asked about developing your own writing style, because that's exactly what we're trying to do through various writing assignments in these courses, is to help you on that journey. Why? Let's see. Reading someone's work, how can one determine what is written is fact? We are learning about, we're talking about, reading about, this book is about helping us cross that threshold into being able to locate accuracy and information. And so it's not only, it's how someone presents their message, but what is their credibility? What kinds of sources are they using? Are they showing their work, in other words? Remember math class growing up? There are certain classes, those upper level classes, college algebra, right, trigonometry and so on. It's all about showing your work. If you're not showing your work, you're literally not, you can't just put the answer on the test. The test is showing your work, like showing you can work through the problem. That's closer to what true a journalistic ambition is all about. This is what it is to be a researcher, a scholar, a scholarly researcher. But showing your work, putting it out there, celebrating, here's the steps, the rigor, the diligence I put in order to make my claims, right? I'm not just cherry picking claims out of thin air because they sound sexy. I am trying to move us forward in whatever conversation I'm engaging by doing all the work, by recognizing all of those that have come behind me on a certain topic or matter, and then bringing them into conversation so that I know now, this speaks to a question we talked about in previous weeks, now I know where I can start to insert my take on it, my addition to the conversation, how I can differentiate. Because by knowing what came before, I can then have that kernel of a seed of a new idea that advances some kind of conversation. And this is true in, the medical field. This is true in the scientific communities. This is true in the humanities. This is true in popular culture. This is true in cultural criticism. This is true in communication. We're wanting to find that. Okay. Finally, let me take a couple of questions really quick from Chris. Let's see. Pop culture is governed by so-called mega entertainment companies. Does this mean the mega companies are now in control of certain aspects of popular culture for profitability, as Denise says on page 70? Almost exclusively. Since the beginning, it's all about profitability. They wouldn't be in the business without it, although many of us are sort of like, I don't know, people on social media, these nano or pseudo celebrities are fame chasers, but ultimately everyone wants, that American dream of profitability. YouTube star, YouTube stars with social media blogs being a leader of exposure in many ways. Do you find YouTube stars fit into high or low culture? We would technically say low culture because look who the audience is or what the art or craft of their message hopes to achieve. It's usually on that lower scale. And let's see, one more. Populism section talks about popular culture being for the people, by the people. How does this relate in terms of the industry and control? One word, synergy. Synergy. More on that in the future. Thank you so much, everyone.